It's what makes America great. I mean, it sounds corny, but it is. Every person can vote, and I know they were saying 4 years ago that one of the elections was 4 votes, so every vote counts. And this is local. This is where it really gets down. You actually know your people. So I just think it's important, and yes, we try our best to make sure that every vote is legal and that every vote counts. Numbers are up, people are really getting involved, and that's what we want. I think it's incredible. I started doing the early voting. Said I would never do early voting, but now I do early voting because it's so convenient. For me, I go by the Rocky Bluff Library, make it on the weekends. My husband and I go together, in and out. I think that the opportunities now where you can do it by the mail, early voting, go to your precincts, it gives you the opportunity. So all you have to do is register and follow the rules for registration, and you can get out and vote, and it's a wonderful thing.
I got to tell you, they're going outstanding. I have the most amazing group of people here. I mean, whether you talk about hiring and training poll workers, which Laura and Cindy do, to obviously Cheryl and Scott, everybody in the team, everybody in the team. And then of course I've got Debbie, who stands behind me with my whip to make sure that I stay in line. No, it's an unbelievable crew to work with. When I think of all the work that the vote by mail people are doing now, Michelle, oh my gosh, they're just outstanding. I'm so lucky, I really am.
Well, one of the key things that you've done as a supervisor of election is to streamline a lot of abilities that the elections office had. And that's like vote by mail, where you put a lot of emphasis, early voting sites, which you've kind of condensed and made them more effective. Tell me why those were important to you.
Well, it's interesting because when we first got here, Manatee County had like 125, 130 different precincts. And I know there were a lot of people concerned when we started cutting back on the number of precincts, but we really got everybody involved. We got the Democrats, the NAACP, the Republican Party, I mean, everybody we could possibly talk to. And we started looking at which precincts were performing and which ones weren't. So we knew that if we could consolidate them, so we could cherry pick our employees and have a better employee mass, if you will. So we really narrowed that down. We were able to save some money. In the 6 years we've been here, we've never increased the budget in Manatee County. And yet, we've opened 5 early voting sites now where there used to be 1. We've really pushed the vote by mail. And so consequently, because of that, we've not had any lines. Now, I can't say that's going to hold up in November because all the constitutional amendments that'll be on there, that's the reason we're pushing so hard now for people to sign up for vote by mail. And I'm sure you've talked to Scott and the rest of them, how important it is for the people to take that vote by mail ballot, especially for the November race. I mean, this one's over. But for November, they're going to need that time at home studying all those constitutional amendments. It's going to be, if they don't study, we're going to end up with long lines at a lot of the precincts, and there's nothing we can do about it at this stage.
And I've heard you speak before, sir. You're saying where it's really important to understand what's on a ballot, because in this election cycle, it's going to be a long ballot.
It's going to be a long ballot. In fact, if you actually look at our ballot, it's back-to-back two-sided 17-inch ballot. Well, if you were to open that up, it'd be a 3-foot ballot. And so I think when I want people to understand what it would take to read a 3-foot ballot when they come to the polls if they have not studied it at home. And even if they decide not to vote by mail, I hope that they study and mark up and really analyze the sample ballot that we will send everybody who doesn't get a vote by mail ballot. And so we're giving them that double shot to look at it. And we're hoping that when they come to the polls, they'll be ready to vote, because there's going to be a line of people behind them and a line of people in front of them, a lot of them who have not really taken the time to study that. And so consequently, we are concerned about what's going to happen in November. And there's no way I can emphasize or overemphasize the importance of registering to vote by mail, and do it now.
Well, one of the key things, sir, from your background in the Senate and everything, you're always, an advocate for an informed voter as well. You want the voters to be informed. You want them to be knowledgeable about what's on the ballot. Why is that important for somebody to come in and there's a wide variety of things that they might not even be interested in?
And that's true, but the ones that they are interested in, they should really be knowledgeable of. The reason I like the vote by mail more than anything else is you get a better educated voter. And by that, I'm not talking about your high school or college or anything like that. The fact that a man and his wife are sitting down at home and they're discussing this ballot, and they're doing it in front of their kids. And all of a sudden the kids start asking questions. Mama, why do you want to vote for that? Or Daddy, why do you want to see that? And all of a sudden we get that younger generation, all of a sudden we've piqued their interest and they want to know about voting and they want to participate. And all of a sudden we're getting a lot of 16-year-olds because they can sign up to vote at 16. They can't vote yet, but they can certainly sign up. And we're hoping to get more families interested in sharing that knowledge and sharing it with their friends and their neighbors and talking about it. And instead of doing the book club this week, why don't we talk about the ballot and who's on it? And I just think that we get a better educated voter that way.
And one of the key things, sir, if you could talk about it for a moment, is that you're on pace now to set a record for turnout in this midterm elections. And it's very critical. And I think a lot has to do with your leadership and the ease of operation that you've created to encourage voters to come in, either by mail or early voting. And that's got to be very rewarding for you to see that those numbers for a midterm election are creeping up.
It is, and it'd be something I'd love to take credit for, but I can't. When you've got the President of the United States stepping into our races down here in Florida, it's caused a lot of turnout that we would not have had before. There's a part of me that wishes he hadn't, okay? But there's also a part of me that is glad that he has, because we're getting more people interested in voting. When you look at the school board races we've got in Manatee County, some of them are very, very contentious and very, very competitive. And so I think there's just a lot of interest this year, because whether it's on the local basis of the school board or if it's on a state governor's race for the governor's office, we've got a lot of people all of a sudden who have taken a keen interest in how this is going to turn out.
We were talking with Scott just a moment ago, and he says, it's so precise here that, by 7:15, 7:30, you'll have, 60, 70% of the results already tabulated, ready for the public to view. And that's got to be a remarkable achievement each time you have an election, to have that kind of not only preciseness, but ability to turn things around and get results so quickly.
I got to tell you, I wish I could take credit for that, but a lot of it is the technology. We've invested a lot in technology in Manatee County, at the same time kept our budget flat, okay? And people say, well, where'd you get the money to buy that additional equipment? We did it because we were able to save expenses in other areas. Those pieces of equipment that we've bought really speed up the process, and so people sitting at home, I expect that they're going to pretty well know 90% of the turnout in Manatee County by 7:20, 7:30. I think we'll be waiting for the rest of the state, okay? Certainly you're going to be waiting on the Panhandle because of a different time zone situation up in the far west Panhandle. So, but I think by and large we're going to have most of the state pretty much covered by 8:30, something along that line.
It's impressive. One thing that's come up in this election cycle, sir, is that there's been several comments by people in the races about meddling in the election process. And you came out very strongly, sir, and said, I'm not seeing it. It's not evident. Can you talk a little
We're
bit about
not,
that?
you know. In fact, as I know a lot of my Republican brethren, and I think most of your listeners know that I'm a Republican by voting for years, but you know, it's really a shame that Senator Nelson is taking the heat for what he said in the heat of a conversation where you're grabbing at data and you're trying to answer questions and stuff like that. And so I think he got ahead of himself, okay? And I don't think that we should be holding that against him. I really don't. It's very, very tough in a debate when you're answering questions off the cuff, okay? And he had some information that he got ahead of himself on. But right now in Florida, we can comfortably say, okay, we've had the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, we've had the FBI, we've had Homeland Security, we've had the Manatee County Sheriff. We've had a lot of these people coming in here and looking at that, in addition to the cyber people that we have in the state and the cyber people that we've got on hand down here. So I don't believe that we're getting any meddling. Do I think that they're trying? Absolutely. The same way we try to mess with them, okay? And people think it was this horrible that they're messing with us. Trust me, we've been messing with them for years, and we'll continue, and they will continue. It's just one of those realities of life. And I think that people are fooling themselves if they don't think that we mess with other people in other elections and that they're not going to continue to mess with us. But do I believe that the results that you're going to see tonight are going to be perfect? I absolutely believe that.
And one final question for you. You're known for your kind of initiatives and innovations, you know, during your years in the Senate and also here. What do you see on the horizon? What would you like to see the supervisor of election move forward with new equipment, new capabilities? What would you like to see as you move forward into the next 6 years?
I think eventually one of the things you might see in Florida is something we would call vote centers, where we won't have 70 or 80 precincts in a particular county, where we might have 10 or 20 that are open, say, 10 days, okay? Where people can stop on their way home from work for an entire week period of time, and that we have those scattered throughout the county on the main thoroughfares where people can drop off, make it more convenient for them. I think that we can see that. You know, we have 3 states in the nation right now that pretty much vote 100% vote by mail. I think you're going to see more of that. Sometimes the question comes up, will we ever see computerized voting? I really don't believe that that'll happen in our lifetime, simply because the average 8th grade kid can crack about any computer out there. So I don't think that's going to happen, but I do believe that you will see a change in the voting precincts.
And one final question for you, Senator. What would you like this community to know about the dedication of the men and women here at the Supervisor of Elections office?
I got to tell you, and I've said it so many times, I cannot quit bragging on the staff that's here. And believe me, they can operate without me, okay? They can operate without any of us, okay? However, as a team, and that's the whole thing, we've got this wonderful, wonderful team concept where you see them all working together and immediately grabbing up where there's a need, they move into it, okay? And so consequently, everything moves smoothly and it moves efficiently on time.
We've had an amazing turnout, the highest turnout, and to this point, you know, in primaries that I've really been involved in. But since in 2002, we had a 29% turnout, and we're easily going to break that 29% turnout mark, and that's going to be the highest turnout we've had since 2002.
And that's pretty remarkable, considering this is a midterm election. What do you attribute that surge in voter turnout to?
I think that we've had an increase in voter turnout for a couple of reasons. One, it being there's some big interest in some of the races. You have a Senate race that is hotly contested. You've got on both sides. You have governor's races again in the Democratic and the Republican side that are very hotly contested. And then also locally, we have school board members that they've been out and about. County commissioners, all of them have done a great job getting their names out, and when they get their names out, it gets the voters out. So I think that's a big part of it. The other thing I think is with the increase in vote by mail. Some people that may not have otherwise voted, they got the ballot in the mail automatically. They may not even realize there was a primary, but they get the ballot. Hey, I'm going to go ahead and vote this. So I think that's also increased the voter turnout.
Well, if I can, sir, let's talk about some of the initiatives that Mr. Bennett and you have kind of followed through on. One is the vote by mail, and the other is the early voting. What does that mean to voters to have these options?
Well, like you said, it's options. Everybody likes to have options, and in this society, we're used to going, to the store where we're at. If we're at work, we go to the store when we're on our way home from work, and we've got all the stores wherever we're at. And so it's not like we've pushed voters to this. They've shown an interest in it, and so we've increased and made it, accessible and easier. We have 5 early voting sites around the county, and that one of the great parts about early voting sites is you don't have to remember what your precinct is. You don't have to remember where to go. You just go to any of these sites and you can vote. As long as you're registered in Manatee County, you can go to any site, early voting site, and vote. And then vote by mail, that it doesn't get any easier than that. You don't have to do anything. It automatically shows up in your mailbox. You have it for 2 or 3 weeks, and you can see who's on your ballot. You can see, wow, I don't know this name. Let me Google them. Let me look them up. And so you have all that opportunity, whereas historically people tended to look at the top couple of races. Everybody was familiar with the governor's race, but they would go to the polls and they would see all these names on their ballot, and I may have heard that one, I may have seen that one signed, but I didn't really think about these ahead of time. Whereas you get to vote by mail, you see all the names, you don't feel pressured. I've got to make a choice right now. I get the time to research it and look at them up. So I think that's the great advantage of vote by mail.
And one other thing, if you could, under Mr. Bennett's leadership and under your stewardship, a big component of the supervised elections office is like customer service. Making sure people get to the right precinct, that they have their information. Tell us about your emphasis on helping the voter.
Like you said, voters do this once or twice every 2 years, most of them. So this is something we live and breathe every day. So it's easy for us to think, oh, they should know this, but voters, it's not on their mind most of the time. They think about it, when they see the ballot or when they see all the signs or they start to see the commercials on TV. That's when they start to think about it. And so not knowing all of the ins and outs, it's easy for them to get lost in some of the details. And when I said early voting, the great part about early voting is you can go to any site. Well, polling places, if you vote on election day, you have to go to the location where you're registered to vote, and that's a state law. Voters don't necessarily know that, and they don't necessarily remember where their location is, and it's been at least 2 years, sometimes 4 years since they voted, so they have to go and try and find that. So we try and make that easy. We have our website, we do PSAs, we have all of these different methods that we try and make sure that the voters are comfortable with, and of course we're always here with phone calls, and they can come to us and talk to us any way that we can. We even take, I shouldn't probably say this, we take Facebook, we get people message us on Facebook and say, hey, where do I vote, what should I do, things like that. So we try and make it as easy and straightforward for them as possible.
And one of the key components is that as it gets to election day, your number of volunteers swell. You have your core staff that's here each and every day, but your volunteers are out there at every precinct. Tell us a little bit about the importance of your volunteers and their ability and training.
What I always say when I do a poll worker class, when I talk to the poll workers, I always say, you think about it, we have 240,000 registered voters in Manatee County. Out of those, maybe a few thousand, maybe that many ever step foot into this office. Probably not even that, but a lot of them still like to go to the polls and vote, or they early vote. And so they see the poll workers a lot more than they see our office. So I always tell them they are truly the face of our office, and I always ask them to make sure our face is smiling. So, that is really the poll workers, our volunteers. We have a phone bank here that, of 14 people today that they come, we train them, they come and they help us, and we can't do it without volunteers. And we do pay them. I'm not going to try and say that they don't get paid at all, but they would argue that it's not really great pay. You know, it is truly volunteering. So.
And final question for you. Kind of run us through the technical details of what's going to happen for the rest of the evening. The polls will close at 7. And what is your process as soon as the polls close?
So there's two parts of that. The first part is at the polls. Like you said, the polls close at 7 p.m. every night, or not every night, on election night. Every polling place in the state closes at 7 p.m. At that time, they will close down the polls. They will first make sure that every voter that's in line at 7 p.m. gets to vote. And then when all the voters have left, they'll close the polls. They will close down the tabulator. They will transmit the results to our office. And then in our office, starting actually within a few minutes, about 4 p.m., we're going to start reviewing. The canvassing board is going to meet. Canvassing board is made up of a county commissioner, a county judge, and the supervisor of elections. They're going to meet and review different things, but they're going to review ballots, vote by mail ballots as we're processing them. Some of them, they get ripped or torn or something like that, so we have to duplicate them. We may have questions on signatures that the canvassing board will have to review. So they're going to do all of that so that at 7 p.m. we will have the majority, if not all of our ballots, vote by mail ballots and everything ready. So we will post those, and then at 7 p.m. we will also post, of course, the vote by mail ballots and the early voting ballots, and that is probably going to be about 60% of the ballots are going to be posted immediately at 7 p.m. So 60% of the vote will be presented at 7 p.m. And then after that, the precincts, as they come in, usually in a primary by about 7:30, the vast majority of all the votes are counted and presented on our website or in person. If you're here, we of course have TVs set up with all our results on them.
And final question for you, Scott, if we may. What do you want people to know about the Supervisor of Elections office and its meaning in the community?
So it's one of those things that you hope people don't think about it too much. It's one of those things that you hope they go to the polls and it's a perfect experience, or they go to early voting and it's a perfect experience, and they only think about it every couple of days every year, and they don't. It's like Disney. You don't understand the magic that goes on in the background. So you hope that their experience is so great that they go on with their lives and they don't even really give it a second thought.
Well, state law requires that one county judge in each county is the chairman or chairperson of the canvassing board. And I've been on the canvassing board as the chair appointed by the chief judge of the 12th Judicial Circuit since 2012, just following the last presidential election when Mr. Obama was elected president of the United States. Well, the canvassing board is composed of the supervisor of elections, the county judge, and the chairman of the county board of county commissioners. And the duties of the canvassing board are to initially certify that all of the voting machines that are used in the primaries and the general election at the various 70 precincts are properly calibrated, as well as the early voting machines that are used in several different locations throughout the state. We did that 10 days ago. The machines are completed to make sure they're zeroed out by staff. They're sealed, they're unsealed when we get to view them, and we run test ballots through all the machines to make sure that they're counting correctly. Right. The machines are then resealed. We don't do all the machines. It's a certain percent as established by state law. The machines are then resealed, and then on election day, they're sent out to the various precincts where they're unsealed and they go into use. There are several machines that are used for the early voting. Those are separate, and the same thing happens when the early voting process begins. Well, as most of the citizens of Manatee County know, you can also vote by mail. So that creates certain problems because when the ballots come in, they have to be properly signed with the voter's name printed on the top, the signature on the bottom. The signature has to match the signature that's on file with the registration, and it also has to match the name that's on the envelope. And sometimes spouses or people that live together switch the envelopes. So all of those mistaken ballots, the ones that are not signed, the ones that are signed incorrectly, the ones that don't match with their signature on file. The supervisor election will pull all those when they come in. They're not actually opened and used as a ballot yet. The voter instead receives a letter in the mail requesting that they complete an affidavit along with some proof of identification, which is returned before 5 o'clock the day before the election starts. And then the canvassing board will review all those affidavits and what we might call provisional mail-in ballots to determine whether or not they're acceptable or not according to state law. We take our positions very seriously, that we want every ballot to count. We do the very best we can in evaluating the ballots to try to determine, did the voter sign the ballot? If there's a question as to how the ballot was completed, because sometimes when the ballots are opened up and put into the early voting machines, they are kicked out by the machine as unacceptable, either because a person did not vote for all the different challenges that were presented, or the voter overvoted, meaning they voted for more than one person. And we have to review that so that it can be sure that this was an overvote. Then the ballot can be duplicated if necessary or resubmitted. Some of the ballots don't go through the machines properly because someone spilled coffee on the ballot, there's a slight tear in the ballot. It can be any number of reasons why the machine might not accept the ballot. And just because a ballot's not accepted by the machine doesn't mean that the ballot won't be counted. It just means that the ballot may have to be duplicated, and the duplicate is sent through the machine to make sure that the voter's intent is realized. And that's the key. What is the voter's intent? Well, we try to review as many as we can. We started 10 days ago when we did the logic and accuracy testing that I described earlier. We also reviewed those problem ballots so that the supervisor had additional ones that they could send notifications. Yesterday we got on the phone, we had the supervisor's office call several people because there was a question as to why someone signed for someone else as a power of attorney. And we needed the original signature of the voter on the ballot, and we didn't want to let that go by without giving the last-ditch effort before 5 o'clock yesterday to see if we can get the voter to correct the problem. Well, that's right. The technology is very, very helpful because the number of ballots over the years that we have been examining for incorrect signatures has gone down because the machines are comparing the signature electronically with what's on file. Nonetheless, the machine's still going to kick out a certain percent. Those are the ones that we have to look at. And then we have the three of us. And sometimes the three of us do not agree on whether or not this is a valid signature or not. Now, there are two places on the ballot on the outside envelope, one where you're supposed to print your name, one where you're supposed to sign it. We look at both to determine whether or not there's anything that we can find. We go back and pull all the prior registrations, not just the most recent one, see if there's any indications there. If the person only printed their name on the top of the form, we'll look at the registration printing to see if the printing matches. And sometimes you can, by looking at the whole picture, say, yes, this is in fact the proper voter. Keep in mind that the ballot is going to a certain address, it's being returned from a certain address. The signature has the same name on it, it's just that the signatures don't match. And part of the reason that this occurs from time to time is, as we all know, as you get older, your signature changes. Sometimes the nature of your business will cause your signature to become much more abrupt or abbreviated than before. Also, registrations now occur on one of the electronic pads at the registration booth where you get your driver's license, and that is not easy to sign, and that creates problems. So, there are a lot of reasons why your signatures don't match. We encourage people, if you get a letter and it says your signature didn't match and you had to do something in order to correct it, that's great. But you should also re-register using your most current signature. And then before you sign your ballot next time, take a look at your driver's license to see how your driver's license signature looks today so you could sign it that's similar to your driver's license. In most cases, that will cure the problem. In the last large general election several years ago, one of our county commissioners won his seat by less than 5 votes. So whether it's a large number or a small number, when you're talking about only the people voting in a certain city or county commission district, every vote certainly counts, and it could make a big difference when you're only talking about a 1 or 2 vote difference. I happen to think, just as a third-person observer that 30% of 240,000 eligible voters who have registered is very small. I certainly would like to see, to make sure that an election that's so important to Manatee County and to the state and to the country, that we're seeing much higher percentages of voters. When you consider that the supervisor election says this was a relatively great voter turnout and it's still only 30%, tells me that myself as a county judge and canvassing board chairman, our politicians throughout this region and the state and the country need to do more to get people who are eligible to vote, regardless of party affiliation, to get out to vote, because the votes are so important. Well, the community should know that they are invited to come down to watch the canvassing board in action. Everything that we do on the canvassing board, in my mind, is a lead up to the presidential election, which occurs every 4 years. So we're 2 years away. This is a process that when we have a county chairman from the county commission, usually that's a different person every time. The staff in the supervisor's office is excellent, but it's always a learning curve. There are always some changes and upgrades that are done to the procedures that are done. But we're all working towards the really big election. We're going to have a gubernatorial election in a few months. We're ready to go for that. They've trained all the poll workers. These poll workers are working today. They'll be working in November to make sure everything runs smoothly. People should come out to see how we do our work and how votes are properly tabulated. And if they were able to watch the logic and accuracy testing of the machines, how the ballots are reviewed, how we acquire all the data from the machines through an encryption process by cellular service, you'd be satisfied that the votes that are counted in Manatee County reflect truly 100% accuracy of what the voters intended. And that's the most important thing. Everyone has to have a great deal of reliance that the system that we have in place works and it is truly reflective of the voters' desires.
Well, my name is Mac Aldrich. I'm the program chair for Manatee District Boy Scouts of America, Southwest Florida Council. And with me this evening, I have members of Troop 76, starting with Steve Kuritz, who is the current Scoutmaster, and some of his guys are going to be helping us on this election eve in Manatee County on August the 28th. Our purpose here tonight is to help when the precincts close this evening around 7 o'clock. We will begin having a rush of folks coming to this building, returning the election equipment, and there's going to be these guys' jobs to make sure that they get checked in properly, that they are then brought into the building for safekeeping and stored where they need to go. And we've been doing this for about 4 years now, and it's been a lot of fun, and it's a good service project. And all of these guys are working on advancements, and so part of what they need to do for this advancement is to earn service hours. And so this evening they're going to get at least 3 service hours that will go towards their advancement. And let me pass it over to Steve, see if he wants to say anything about his guys.
Thanks, Mac. Just really quick, this is actually Troop 76's third election. When I put the sign-up sheet, half the troop is here. We had 9 boys sign up. We have 18, 9 signed up. And why do they do it? This is their third time because they've had fun. It's fun. They know what the election process is, what they've done with bringing things in and putting everything away. It's just, they really enjoy it. And I'm proud of them for signing up. And this being our third time, we're ready to go.
Manatee County's got to understand this election that we just wrapped up tonight was easy. I wanted them to see, this is our November ballot. We've already temporarily laid it out. As people can see, that ballot is practically 3 feet long. If they don't vote by mail, if they don't review their sample ballot, when they come down to the voting precinct and try to read all this and try to understand it, they're going to have long lines, and we're really asking everybody to vote by mail or at least read and initial your sample ballot so you understand what's going to be on it. The Constitutional Revision Commission has made it very, very complicated, and there's too many issues on there, and so we're really hoping that people will take time to study this at home and realize they've got a 3-foot ballot in November.